much fun. Good morning. Welcome to Community Church of Boston. We are a peace and justice congregation, and we've been doing this since 1920. That's 105 years of good trouble in the city of Boston. Happy Mother's Day. And we light a candle. The Unitarian Universalists call it the chalice, or we call it the candle, or you can call it whatever you like. And we take this moment to read a statement that Community Church came up with about this event. And we thank Alan Perez especially for putting together this statement about this time, which is the 80th anniversary of the end of the World War II in Europe. VE Day, what they call it in Europe, or in Moscow, there's a different name that we will come to right in this statement. Peace, equality, and shared prosperity are humanistic values and inalienable rights that all people deserve to enjoy. Yet throughout recorded history, this collective aspiration has remained tragically elusive, thwarted time and again by class divisions, power struggles, and human greed, as even sacred scriptures attest. Every war leaves behind unspeakable suffering. Some have cost millions of lives in order to halt the rise of absolute evil. On this May 9th, Moscow commemorates the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Nazism and the Allied capture of Berlin. We join in remembrance of the profound sacrifice of those who fought for Europe's liberation. The Great Patriotic War, as it is known in Russia and beyond, claimed the lives of over 27 million Soviet citizens, a staggering loss that must never be forgotten. Historical truth must not be erased. The outcome of World War II was determined above all on the Eastern Front, where the most decisive and brutal battles in human history were fought. As a community of conscience and faith, we pray that such horrors never repeat. We honor the courage and suffering of entire nations, soldiers and civilians, women and men, elders and children, whose lives were consumed by this unparalleled tragedy. We mark this solemn anniversary with a moment of silence in tribute to their resilience and as a reaffirmation of our own commitment to freedom, justice, and lasting peace. May their memory endure, and may their sacrifice move us to build a world in which human dignity triumphs over all darkness. As part of our observance, we light our traditional candle that symbolizes introspection and hope and observe a solemn moment of silence. Bright morning star arising, bright morning star arising, bright morning star arising. Daylight is a-breaking in my soul, in my soul. Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? Daylight is a-breaking in my soul, in my soul. They are gone to heaven shouting, they are gone to heaven shouting, they are gone to heaven shouting. Daylight is a-breaking in my soul, and spring again. Saw the old man in his garden, inched his rocky way down dark brown rows, and though the years and stiff joints have made it hard for him, Still he's out on the first warm day, and he's ready to go every year. I've seen him out on that first warm day, and he's ready to go. Well, good morning. That was two songs, one dedicated to our mothers. I lost mine a year and a month ago, and remember Mom so fondly, and her last years, especially when she was here in Massachusetts with us, my brother and me and our spouses. And so we send tribute to all you mothers, and solidarity to all you mothers. And I remember one Mother's Day, I was in Nicaragua, and somebody said, "Oh, this is the day when everybody comes and says, 'Oh, Mom, we love you.' And then the rest of the 364 days, Mom is cooking for you and cleaning for you, and so we hope to change that forever." Welcome, everybody. We have a magnificent program for you today, and I want to start by just introducing Jennifer Armstrong. Well, I'm going to introduce them both because they're sisters, Jennifer and Rebecca Armstrong. It's 41 years, 1984. The two of them hosted my partner, fiddle player Randy Sabine, and me in a house concert in the outskirts of Chicago in a big house that they happened to be renting. It's been just a deep friendship ever since. Long distance sometimes, and sometimes not. Jennifer lived in Chicago, moved to Boston for a while she was in Boston. Our son was born, and she organized this beautiful banner welcoming us back from the hospital with a baby in hand. Jennifer's two daughters, Georgia Rose and Susanna, babysat Dan during his first 3 years of life, and then off they went. Jennifer moved to Maine. Rebecca moved to Indiana. We stayed where we were. We're still in the same place. Susanna came back when she was at RISD. That's Jennifer's daughter. Lived with us during a couple of summers of summer jobs. From Rhode Island School of Design. So it's a deep, long friendship, and I don't care if it's nepotistic. I'm just very glad to welcome both of them, Jennifer as the music this morning and Rebecca as the message. Jennifer, good morning.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm going to start out with this song that, it was the first song I wrote that was a keeper. And Dean requested it for this morning. It's called The White Goddess, and it's taking a look at the three faces of womanhood: maiden, mother, and crone. Although a shout out to Peggy Lipschutz, who said there's really a fourth stage in there, which is our work for the world as comrade. So maiden, mother, comrade, crone. But today it's just the three. I am the morning, the light at the dawn. I am the maiden beginning her song. Golden light opens the sky to share. Freshness, newness, hope is my prayer. Spring is my mantle, flowers my crown, the joy of the rain pattering down, holding the lover close to my heart, ever renewing, that is my part. Spring, maiden, morning, love is mine. I am the heat at the fullness of noon. I am the mother, the birth coming soon. Summer comes in with sweat and with strain, tending the fruit and the ripening grain. The babe in my arms, the milk from my breast, flowing, giving, soon we will rest. I give birth for all to take heart. The harvest is in, and that is my part. Summer, harvest, mother, birth is mine. I am the evening, the darkness of night. Flowers and fruits are covered from sight. Winter comes in with harsh despair. Quiet fills the brittle air. The black of my cloak enshrouds us all. Only the silent will hear my call. I am the ending before the new start. I am death, and that is my part. Winter, stillness, darkness, death is mine. I am the night, the noon and the dawn. I am the quiet and I am the song. Maiden and mother and aged crone, I am all three, never alone. Love, birth, death, all is mine.
Jennifer, I gotta say that is a masterpiece. It's the only way I can describe it. I just cannot forget the first time I heard the recording that features the three generations. The 11, 12-year-old girls sing the first verse, Jennifer the second verse, and Jennifer's mom, Jerry, singing the last verse. Is just a really touching thing, and beautiful orchestration by Jennifer's across the street neighbor, whose name I don't remember.
Bob Bowker.
Bob Bowker. I urge you all to seek out that recording. If you can't find it, seek out me and I will lead you to it. That's just
find it on my Bandcamp and hear the whole, all the
Yes.
three generations.
Go to Jennifer Armstrong's Bandcamp platform to find White Goddess. That's the name of the song, White Goddess, inspired by the author. Jennifer, what's the author's name of the White Goddess? She might.
Robert Graves.
Robert Graves is the author of this amazing book. So thank you again, Jennifer. A few things to talk about here. Sometimes they ask me what religion I am, and I tell them I'm a Quaker Unitarian Zen Jutheist. But then I add something, which is that when I'm in El Salvador, I feel very Catholic, because I know about the struggles that some people in villages went through during the awful war years when they were in the wilderness under bombs and machine gun fire, and that their faith was what took them through. And I must say that this last week, again, I felt quite Catholic. When I saw that new Pope come out and 100,000 people welcome him with jubilation, and finding out about this man, and finding out that he, like me, bicultural, spent a good part of his life as a missionary and then a bishop in Peru, in a very impoverished area. We had a Peruvian who told me the name of the zone where he was. And And that's his background, and it's sort of a little bit of Pope Francis, maybe with a lot more gas, because of his history as a missionary for the least of these among you, as the scripture says. It's an exciting moment, and I look forward to this man's ministry, Pope Leo XIV. And then again, I can't help but think of Tom Lehrer. First you get down on your knees, fiddle with your rosaries, bow your head with great respect, and genuflect, genuflect, genuflect. I'm not a reverend, and I praise irreverence. I call myself Irrev, and there you go. And there must be irreverence in every religion. A little bit of it, say I. So there you have it. Long live Pope Robert Prevost, Pope Leo XIV. A couple more announcements, and this announcement is prefaced by this quote: "Terrible things are happening outside at any time of night or day. Poor, helpless people are being dragged out of their homes." Anne Frank, January 13th, 1943. History repeats itself. It's happening right here, right now. We had a peña last night. That's a Latin American style open mic here at the church, and I was present. Usually I have a conflict doing sound for a concert somewhere else, but this time I was able to come, and it was a lovely event. A very strong focus on Latin America. A lot of kind of like a church, like a service, a sacred circle, going around and each one talking about their mother, each one talking about joys, about concerns, and about hope. And thank you, Jose Aleman, for leading that last night. And a big topic of conversation is what's going on with ICE in the neighborhoods, and the horrible event that happened just a couple of days ago in Worcester. And that's the first announcement, which is that there's a demonstration, 2 p.m., Worcester Common, for all of those who can attend that. What really drives the movement is the fast presence of a lot of people. I remember when there was the travel ban during the 45's administration, at the beginning, the travel ban. 2 days later, there were 100,000 people right out here in Copley Square, and it was the most powerful thing, and it sort of took the winds out of the sails of that travel ban, which eventually fizzled out because it was such a horrific, stupid, racist idea. The other thing I wanted to tell you about comes from Fran Rosnowski, longtime friend of the church and recently became a member of the church. And Fran tells us about the following. It's a poster. I need to print out this poster and have it on our table. And it says, "See ICE, ? Call the LUCE hotline, LUCE hotline." And this is for people in this area. If you see ICE, call this hotline, and I'll read it to you. 617-370-5023. And you saw how effective that was in Worcester, although it had a terrible outcome. The Worcester police were right there reinforcing ICE's Gestapo tactics, and as soon as the middle woman, young woman with a baby, passed off the baby to someone else, they grabbed her and threw her to the ground. It was just a horrific thing to watch, and there were all kinds of cameras and people saying, "How dare you? How can you look yourself in the mirror? How can you live with yourself doing this stuff?" And we saw it so many times. So this turns into a joy. Rumesa Öztürk, free. I wanted to go to Medford to find out where she lived and welcome her. Rumesa Öztürk, who was just Gestapo-like grabbed off the Tufts campus or near her house in Somerville and taken away by masked men, and you all saw that horrible video. But Rumesa is back in her dorm room finishing her PhD, and I heard Ayanna Pressley went to Louisiana to see Rumesa in that horrible detention center there, and this was someone who spent a lot of her time there, basically supporting and helping other women who were in that facility. And that's what she talked about to Ayanna. And she also talked about that she has asthma and was not able to get medication and had an attack while she was there. It's just a horrific moment. So Rumesa is free. Mosen is free. Did you see Mosen when he came out in Vermont? There were hundreds of Vermonters there to greet him, and it was just this joyous, we shall overcome moment. And he gave such a wonderful speech. And it's time to free Khalil as well, the Columbia student. Free him. And it's time to free Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Bring him back from El Salvador. And free the 200 Venezuelans who were unjustly sent to that horrible gulag with no recourse. It's time to bring them back. Now. And I'm done, except that I want to tell you about a couple of wonderful things coming up. Next week, on the subject of El Salvador, we have a wonderful new guest. His name is Professor Jorge Cuellar, and he is assistant professor of Latin American Studies, focusing on Central America at Dartmouth College. And we're hoping he'll be with us in person. Please, Jorge, get in your car and drive. We really want to meet you. We want to be with you in the flesh. He will try to be with us in the flesh, but if not, he will be with us online. And his address is called Bukele and the U.S. Carceral Archipelago. My reason for loving El Salvador was always the defiance of the people's movement there, the popular movement, and their organizing in villages, and unfortunately the country's fame has turned into this horrific carceral nightmare, which is, and proud of it, that president showed us his Bukele hell, which is a gulag, and he's so proud of how awful they're paraded around in their underwear and pushed around by jackbooted Gestapo types and held in cells, 100 in a room with one toilet in the middle. It was just, it's ungodly. And the fact that Trump sympathized with him, as if that were a great thing, that we could send a lot more there. So I look forward to May 18th, Professor Jorge Cuellar. May 25th, we have a special celebration here at the church. It's a meeting and a luncheon and an oral history from our elders. We have a lot of elders, and some of them are able to be with us and some of them not, and we're going to try to get some video tributes from them to the rest of us. The likes of Lee Fitch, David Lewitt, Dick Crowley, Tilly Teixeira, Nancy Messam, Dick Kashishin, Homer Frank, Judith and David Woodruff, Jim Casteris, Eli Sussman, and David Rothhauser. And there are others that I've forgotten, I'm sure, but there's not enough room on the page. So we'll also show a film that Judith Woodruff made back in the early 90s when she was leading delegations to the Soviet Union. And this one in particular was focused on Armenia. So we'll see the film that she made back then. June 1st, it's our last program, and it's a retelling, or let's call it an encore presentation of Phil Turney of the USS Liberty, and it's a story about the USS Liberty incident or intentional attack Here I have a hat that is from the USS Liberty. On the back it says "Justice for Liberty." And those of you who don't know, it was a reconnaissance ship that was shot at and almost destroyed and sunk by the Israeli army in the 1967 Six-Day War. And the question and controversy and scandal of what it was that happened and how it reached to the highest of places is what Phil Turney and his fellow alumni, if you call it that, of the USS Liberty tell about and demand an investigation, even all these decades later. Let me see. We have July 10th. No, that was last night. I don't need to announce that unless you want to watch it on the YouTube. May 10th. It's Todd Pierce, JFK's Principles of Peace versus the Conservative Movement in U.S. Politics. And then June 10th, big event, Jeffrey Sachs, the amazing commentator and world-renowned economics professor, will join us online on June 10th, part of the John F. Kennedy Peace Speech Committee, June 10th virtual program. Be in touch with us and we'd be glad to let you know how you can join those online events. They're always on our YouTube channel, but there's a Zoom option as well. Enough of my announcements. Let's move on. We have a little bit of a different format today. We will be hearing from Rebecca. She has 3 segments. Each one is a mother of the movement, lost mother of the movement, Mother's Day program celebrating some influential but lesser known women in Unitarian Universalist history. Rebecca, I'm so glad to welcome you for the first time to Community Church of Boston. Reverend Rebecca Armstrong is a Unitarian Universalist minister, not practicing right at this moment, but involved in all sorts of healing and spiritual enlightenment endeavors. I'm so glad to be Rebecca's friend and so glad to introduce her to you. Hello, Rebecca.
Hello, Dean. And hello, Community Church of Boston. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. I did my ministerial training at Meadville Lombard in Chicago. And my favorite classes were the history classes, because it was then that I realized that Unitarians were not just the hippest churches around where I and my family had been performing folk songs for decades, but in fact was a really wonderful old group of rebels at heart. And our history goes back more than 500 years. And I want to tell you some of those stories, because there's nothing more invigorating than realizing you're part of a great family of rebels who've dug their heels in against injustice and are going to continue to dig their heels in. And we're part of that long body of resistance throughout the ages. So let me tell you about some of the lesser known mothers of the movement. We begin this story more than 500 years ago. And it may seem strange to you that a tiny country called Transylvania, south of Poland, west of Ukraine, would be one of the cornerstones and bedrocks of the Unitarian movement. It's so fantastical that it sounds like some Hollywood scriptwriter's fantasy. Let's throw in Transylvania. But in fact, it was the accident of geography and fierce mother love that made this story come alive. So come back with me 500 years to the year 1519, when young Isabella Jagiellon is born to the Polish King Sigismund and his beautiful Italian wife, Bona Sforza. So Bona Sforza is really our first mother. Here she is, Italian princess, married off for political reasons to the Polish king, her firstborn, a daughter, Isabella. Now, Bona Sforza knew that as the eldest daughter, she was going to be a pawn in the great chess game happening all over Europe. And so she wanted to ensure that her daughter would not be a pawn sadly lost, tipped over early in the game. So Bona Sforza made sure that her daughter Isabella was well schooled, spoke multiple languages, knew her history in and out, and knew how to cunningly move through the dynamics of the conflicts between these European countries. Bona Sforza brought two important people into her daughter's life very early. One was a humanist teacher by the name of Johannes Hunter, who'd already decided that the Roman Catholic Church did not have all the answers, and he went back to the Neoplatonic sources for his wisdom. He was the tutor for Isabella. Her mother also brought the very important Giorgio Biandrata, a personal physician who specialized in women's health in the early 1500s. Savor that for a moment, if you will. And so Giorgio Biandrata enters the family, the royal family, is the physician to the Queen Mother and then to Isabella. Now, it's true, Isabella and her fortunes were tossed back and forth like one of these bouncing balls between various European monarchs who saw the advantage of an alliance with the King of Poland, very, very powerful at that time. You would be astonished at the number of betrothals that were called off because the groom had been killed in battle, a sign of the times, one of the hazards we don't think of often enough. But finally, at the tender age of 20, which actually was rather old in those days, Isabella is married to the King of Hungary. Age 20, she's married off, widowed a year later, and 2 weeks after she has given birth to the one and only son, John Sigismund, who will grow up to become our first and only Unitarian king. So here's Isabella, married off and trying to make her way in this crazy world with her young son. And now she's widowed. This does not bode well, right? Young woman already wounded by having been widowed like this, she becomes a pawn once again. And for 5 years, her life is a misery as she runs hither and thither, trying to protect her son and his claim to the throne. Now here is where geography steps in to play a critical role in the fate and evolution of Isabella and John and the Unitarian movement. Transylvania sits in an exquisitely beautiful spot in the middle of Europe, a beautiful valley that is bordered by important mountain ranges on both sides. To the northwest, the powerful Habsburg Empire is trying to move down. From the southeast, the equally powerful Ottoman Empire is trying to move north. And right there in the middle is Transylvania. Now, it was at this time that the great Suleiman the Magnificent becomes the Ottoman ruler. And he sees what's happening in the dynamics of Europe, and he decides to befriend Queen Isabella and her young son. And it is Suleiman the Magnificent that offers them safe passage to Transylvania, where John will take up his rightful place eventually as the king. But in the meantime, it is Isabella who will reign as queen regent, holding that space for her son. And so Isabella and John travel to Transylvania with Giorgio Biandrata to take up their role, their historical place in Transylvanian and Unitarian history. Now, be reminded that this century is the hotbed where the Roman Catholic Church has been seriously challenged for the first time. Martin Luther has nailed his 95 Theses to the wall. Calvin has come up with his book, and more importantly for us, Michael Servetus has written and published his book, The Errors of the Trinity, which has given rise to the Unitarian idea that the Catholic Church has become too powerful and too concerned with its own wealth, and that the true spiritual import of the teachings has been lost. And so it is that Giorgio Biandrata begins to tell Isabella about the importance of pushing back papal control of her country and bringing in these other warring factions to provide a safe haven. And Suleiman the Magnificent sees the advantage of having between himself and the Habsburgs this buffer zone, this beautiful valley. And it is Suleiman. Now remember that the Muslims have already understood the importance of a kind of religious tolerance, of letting the various groups that they have controlled and dominated continue their practices. And so Suleiman tells Isabella, I will support you. I will support you in making your country a place of tolerance. And here we have, for the first time in Western history, a religious doctrine that says, let everyone practice together. Queen Isabella issues this beautiful, beautiful edict. And here is one of my favorite sentences from it. Her decree of religious tolerance says, everyone might hold the faith of his choice together with the new rituals or the old ones without offense to any. Now, this is radical. Remember, this is the middle of the 16th century. This is 1557. And she makes this decree. And when it is time for her to pass the reins of power to her son, King John Sigismund, he takes the throne at age 19. He continues his mother's important work in religious tolerance. He also listens to the humanists, to the Unitarians. Giorgio Biandrata is one of his chief counselors. And at a very dangerous moment in Transylvanian history, when the Diet, the noblemen, have come into council to try to see if they should realign with the Vatican and the Pope and the Roman power and declare Transylvania a Catholic country. King John Sigismund, on the advice of Giorgio Biandrata, says, no, we are going to stay true to my mother's vision. We are going to become the most religiously tolerant country the world has seen. And he issues the Edict of Torda in 1568, which is historically the very first religious tolerance edict that is acknowledged in the West. And here is what he said. We reaffirm that in every place the preachers shall preach the gospel, each according to his own understanding, and if the congregation like it, well, if not, no one shall compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied. Isn't that delicious? I mean, the recognition already that there is a psychological dimension to religious faith, and that the ability for people to come to choose their own ministers, to find their own way to their hearts and souls and minds is the way that God wanted it. This is radical. This edict goes on strong throughout the lifetime of King John Sigismund. And in one of the delightful passages of Wilber's History of the Unitarians, it is noted that in the pubs all over Transylvania, you would find people sitting over their pints in fierce theological debate and discussion, and not one was killed. And so, my friends, if we can come to this delicious moment of 500 years ago, where our forefathers and our foremothers were able to plant the seed of religious tolerance, which we are still trying to grow into the axis mundi for our own sad world. Let us come back to remember the role of the mothers who teach their sons well the importance of this idea of individual search for truth and the importance of providing the safe haven in which people can follow their own spiritual path. To introduce our song from my sister Jennifer, I want to point out another interesting fact, which is that when Isabella was reinstated in Transylvania under the protection of Suleiman the Magnificent, one of her first things was to redo the whole monetary system to cement her control. And her gold ducats had on one side a coat of arms that had a wolf, a unicorn, and 3 panthers. Talk about powerful totem animals. On the other side of the coin was a mother and child. Certainly a nod to Virgin Mary and Jesus, but I like to think that in her heart, she was also acknowledging fierce mother love is what made this happen, is what made this possible. In honor of Queen Isabella and her young son, baby John Sigismund, and their fierce fight to bring religious tolerance to the world, let's have a lullaby for baby John.
This song was written by Joe Mapes, and sleep, sleep, wee small thing, into this troubled world you bring new love, new light, new hope for a better day. Sleep, sleep, sleep and wait. Wake to a world that's free of hate, where children will know they grow in a world made of love. Donald is here. What can we show him? How can we help him to grow without fear? Teach him to love. This much we owe him, and the millions of Donalds yet to be here. Sleep, sleep, sleep and nest. Wake to a world that you have blessed with love, with light, with hope for a better day.
Thank you, sister. So for those of you sitting there at the community church in Boston, I devote this next story because it concerns a former minister of the Unitarian Church of Boston, none other than Ralph Waldo Emerson. Yes, that man, the intellectual giant, the architect of American culture, one of the most renowned and respected Americans ever to walk these shores. His lifelong commitment to self-improvement through reading, through journaling, the art of conversation is well known to many. But what is not as well known is where Ralph Waldo got his ideas and his discipline. Who did Ralph Waldo call his muse? Whom did he call the best writer in all of Massachusetts? From whom did he borrow metaphors, themes, and full sentences to use in his own essays, lectures, and sermons? Mary Moody Emerson. His aunt, who we call now the mother of the pietistic transcendentalists, she was the inspiration. She is the woman behind Ralph Waldo Emerson. Mary Moody Emerson was born into a family with a long tradition of respect for religion, for ministry, for education. However, her early life reads like a Charles Dickens novel of deprivation and despair. At age 2, she is orphaned and sent to live with her ailing grandmother and a mad aunt, a literally insane aunt. And there she enters what she calls 15 years of chaos and deprivation. She writes later of this period, "Oh, I could give facts of the long-drawn years of imprisoned minds and hearts which poor uneducated orphans must endure." You would think that that would be the end of it, right? To be orphaned and sent to live with an ailing grandmother and a mad aunt. But no. Our fierce spiritual mother of young Waldo, in fact, uses those 15 years of drudgery, burdened with the innumerable chores of daily life, having to clean and cook and take care of these 2 elderly relatives. She nevertheless finds time to read the Bible, Plato, Plotinus, Marcus Aurelius, Shakespeare, Coleridge, Wordsworth, Locke, Byron, Spinoza, Rousseau, Goethe, among others, and begins her own habit of daily journaling to keep her own sanity alive. 15 years of servitude and self-education, Mary Moody Emerson is able to survive. And then, at the tender age of 17, in a move that some might say was out of the frying pan and into the fire, she is called to the home of her elder brother, who has just died, leaving behind a sad widow and 6 young children, including Ralph Waldo Emerson. So for the next 7 years, Mary Moody becomes the surrogate mother/father of these young orphans, her nieces and nephews. It is here, under the tutelage of Mary Moody Emerson, that young Ralph Waldo learns the importance of daily journaling, which becomes his modus operandi for the rest of his life. She reads them poetry. She encourages them to go out in nature. She has a trifecta of proverb, of her own making, which she has the children live by. She says, "Scorn trifles, lift up your aims, do what you are afraid to do." She has clearly lived by these 3 slogans for her own tender years, and this is what Ralph Waldo begins to absorb into his own spiritual and intellectual bloodstream, the fierce discipline of Mary Moody Emerson. So after 7 long years of working with these youngsters and this impoverished household, by the way, she sets up a boarding house to take in boarders so that they get enough money that they can put food on the table. So she's handling things like what the mother would do and what the father would do. She is the surrogate parent for all of them. She's also able to produce an enormous body of writings of her own. She's constantly writing in her journal and what she calls her almanacs. These almanacs are critically important because the style of them is very much what Emerson later takes on for his own style of writing. It's these deep ruminations that take you down through the writings of other great sages to your own deep spiritual intuitions and intellectual machinations about these ideas. How, you might ask, was she able to maintain this amount of effort for her own self-development while simultaneously carrying on this extraordinary amount of daily caretaking of other human beings? We may never know, but Ralph Waldo says of his aunt simply, "She spun with a greater velocity than any of the other tops," which I love. I love that image. Now, despite receiving a proposal of marriage in her late 20s, she declined and wrote in her journal that she doubted the advantages of marriage in a woman's life and decided to choose instead for her life companionship reading, writing, and artful conversation. Ralph Waldo adored his Aunt Mary Moody. And throughout his life, in their long correspondence, you will find him begging her to send one of her almanacs to him. She wrote almanacs for 50 years, and thank goodness they are actually all saved at the manuscript almanacs of Mary Moody Emerson at Penn State University. So we have access to those. But just to give you a sense of the enormity of her output, Ralph Waldo himself, through multiple borrowings of these almanacs, compiled 900 pages of what he called her best work. And he used these passages from her almanacs as quotes and grounding for his own work. He said once, "I wonder if I will live long enough to study out the tendencies and ideas which shine, sparkle, and glow in her Sibylline pages." Her letters to her nephew, Ralph Waldo, represent some of the most beautiful correspondence between a surrogate mother and a spiritual son. And one of my favorites comes from a letter that she wrote to him in 1821, where she says, "How is thy soul?" Not the soul of which St. Paul speaks. I ask about your poetic soul. The spirits of inspiration are abroad tonight. Go out, go out. And there's something so tender about this. And knowing that this powerful woman, this intellectual giant, stood behind him and was supporting him at that deep, soulful level, we can imagine how it is that Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote the most important essay probably in American spiritual literature, his fabulous book called Nature, finding the divine impulse in the created world, no longer waiting for the hereafter, but finding here, now, in this place, shall we manifest what is most precious and most divine. Mary Moody Emerson, years 1774-1863. And now we move into our final chapter, our third in the trifecta of not forgotten, but lesser known mothers of the Unitarian movement. And this one is very special to me, and you'll find out at the end of her story why I have a special place in my heart for Olympia Brown. Olympia Brown, born 1835, died in 1926, is the eldest daughter of Universalist parents. And like the other women we have talked about, her mother insisted on education for the daughters. The local schoolhouse, in fact, was built on the property where Olympia Brown grew up. Her mother had all of the daughters learn to read, to write multiple languages, dive deep into the classics, to come out with a genuine education. Olympia, though, was different. She wasn't content to educate herself simply for the purpose of being able to converse prettily with the men who might come courting. which was sort of the standard practice on the East Coast. You only need to know this much in order to be acceptable, but more than that is probably not good for you as a woman. This was the basic attitude. And Olympia sadly found herself rejected by multiple colleges who just saw no point in investing anything in a woman because what would she do with it? Finally, St. Lawrence Theological School accepted her without any kind of stipend or scholarship. Again, well, we'll let you in, but we don't know what you're going to do with it. However, they said, we're not a school that could ordain anyway. So if your denomination wants to take on that challenge of ordaining the first woman, fine, we'll let them have the problem to deal with. And so Olympia Brown graduates from the St. Lawrence Theological Seminary, and with her degree in hand, she goes to the Universalists and demands to be admitted. Now, this is interesting because there's all sorts of rationalizations of why they could have turned away a woman. But to their credit, the Universalists decided to go way out on a limb and say yes. And Olympia Brown becomes the very first American woman to be ordained by her religious order. So there she is. She has, in 1863, broken the glass ceiling and become the first ordained woman in America. And for 10 years, she works alone as a Universalist minister on the East Coast. In 1873, she marries John Henry Willis and very boldly keeps her own last name. That was almost unheard of, right? But she's become known as a minister under the name Olympia Brown, and that's the name she keeps. She and her husband, John Henry, who turns out to be a real solid, salt of the earth kind of woke husband, always going out the extra step to support his wife's career. They have 2 children, and she decides that something new is needed. So when she hears about this little church in Racine, Wisconsin, which is really kind of the outskirts, kind of the Wild West still in the 1800s, she decides that she'll go and become their minister. So she goes to the Good Shepherd Church of Racine, Wisconsin. And while there, she, and you'll like this, Dean, she clearly had your spirit. She lines up the greatest list of speakers you can imagine. For their pulpit, they have Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Julia Ward Howe, Susan B. Anthony, and dozens of other great suffragists and abolitionists, all of them now making the rounds to the Racine Church because Olympia Brown is there and wants her congregation to get with the program. She starts all sorts of social programs. The entire city of Racine, Wisconsin is essentially her congregation. Tremendous amount of effort. But then at age 53, she hears a new vocational call. Now remember that these women, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they have been struggling for decades to get women the vote, and they still haven't got it. And so at age 53, Olympia Brown says, I'm leaving this pulpit. I need a bigger congregation. I need to talk to the American people about what needs to happen next. And so she spends the next decade going around giving hundreds and hundreds of lectures on the importance of women having the vote. Finally, as we know, in the late summer of 1920, the 19th Amendment is finally ratified. Women are given suffrage. And a month after this momentous date, Olympia Brown returns to her old pulpit in Racine, Wisconsin, to give a celebratory sermon. And I want to read just a short passage from that. She says, and I like this passage because it seems so au courant, right? A short time ago, a correspondent of The Nation wrote to the editor begging him to publish something hopeful. He said he was so tired of being discouraged. He spoke for thousands who in this time of uncertainty, chaos, and confusion are longing for a ray of light, something to relieve the discouragements of the hour. We have hoped to make the world safe for democracy, to establish a league of peace. But the very first necessity in reform work is the recognition of the sacred capabilities of the human. The foundation of democracy is the realization that every human being is entitled to life, is worthy of respect, and requires an atmosphere of justice and liberty for development. We can never make the world safe for democracy by fighting, but by showing the power of justice done to each humble individual, shall we be able to create a firm basis for the state. I mean, these words, my friends, can and should be on our churches right now. We need her wisdom again. But let me bring now right up close to the present and my own heart, because it was at this church, at the old Good Shepherd Church in Racine, Wisconsin, now called the Olympia Brown Church, that I did my internship during my ministry years. And here's how it happened. In 1993, Chicago hosted the centennial celebration of the Parliament of World's Religions. I was there representing the Joseph Campbell Foundation, but also myself as a recently minted Unitarian minister. And I performed on one of the main stages and did a song that involved sign language. Unbeknownst to me, Reverend Tony Larson had also performed on a main stage and done something involving sign language, which led to the rumor that all Unitarian ministers had to learn sign language before graduating and being ordained, which is not true, but I loved it and wished that it were true. But because of this strange event, Tony Larson and I were introduced to each other. And when I realized his proximity to Chicago, I asked him if I could do my internship with him at Olympia Brown Church, and he warmly welcomed me. And so it was there in the spring of 1994 that I started my internship at Olympia Brown Church. And I want to tell you about one very specific thing that happened that brings us full circle. It was probably the fourth or fifth Sunday that I was there. And a young man from the congregation came up to me before the service and asked me very earnestly if I would sit next to him in the front row for the service. Tony Larson would start, and then I was going to go up and do a guest reading of some sort. So I was going to be right there in the front. The young man seemed very nervous. And so I assured him, yeah, let's sit together in the front row. I had no idea why this was so important. But when it came time for the joys and concerns, which is one of the more or less standard features of Unitarian Universalist services, where the congregants get to stand up and share things that have happened, whatever. The young man sitting next to me as the service started whispered, "I'm so glad you're here because I'm planning to come out to the congregation today." Now, given the times that we were in, I assumed that he meant he was coming out of the closet, that he was announcing that he was gay, which would have been lovely because Tony Larson was gay and would have welcomed him warmly. Imagine my surprise then that during the joys and concerns, the young man stands up, looks at Tony, looks at me, looks to the congregation and says, "I would like you to be witness to my testimony that today I am becoming a Muslim." There was a shocked silence, as you can well imagine, as people are trying to take in the actual meaning of his words. But then he went and made his shahada. He said the sacred words that are what is required for someone to become a convert to Islam. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. He gave his shahada to his family. He wanted us to help him make that transition into his next chapter of his faith journey. There was a stunned moment, and I stood up and instinctively put my hand on his shoulder. I heard a rustle, and the person behind me also stood up and put their hand on his other shoulder. Tony came down from the pulpit and came up and put his hand on the young man's shoulder. And all of the congregation rose, and each person putting a hand on the shoulder in front of them, which is the traditional blessing when a Unitarian becomes a minister. We, his spiritual family, welcomed him to the next chapter of his faith journey. That moment was the proudest moment of my Unitarian life, because at that moment, we demonstrated what it means to be religiously tolerant. It doesn't mean being tight-lipped. It means celebrating and embracing each person's individual journey, their soul calling to what they need to do next. That moment, my friends, I thought to myself, Queen Isabella would be proud of us, for here we are showing that everyone might hold the faith of his or her choice, together with new rituals or old ones, without giving offense to any. My friends, this is our rich history. This is our tradition. This is the story of the lost mothers of the Unitarian movement. And I hope that something in their stories has enriched your story, and that you will go forth with renewed determination to carry on the good fight. By God, it's been 500 years, it might be 500 more, but we'll never give up. We'll never lie down. We shall always go forward.
Yay!
Yay, big time. Oh,
That made me cry. So do I get to sing a song to celebrate that?
Yes.
I'm so grateful that Rebecca's my sister. Aren't I lucky? This song is called Waging Peace, and it's another one I wrote. I took the song, traditional song, Parcel of Rogues in a Nation, and I wrote new lyrics for it that say waging peace for our children. Farewell to all our warlike fame, farewell our martial glory, farewell even to our hero's name, so famed in battle story. The patriot winds will blow no more, dividing our world's nations from shining sea to black sea shore. We are waging peace for our children. Farewell to tyrants sick with greed, farewell to lies and slaughter, farewell to those that deny our need. We will give to them no quarter. We are all the same who live and breathe. For love we thirst like water. for our children. Where all was darkness shall be light, where there was weeping laughter. Where once was death, now there is life, and shall be ever after. Where once we heard only marching feet, now we all are dancing. We shout as one with all our might. We are waging peace for our children. We are waging peace for our children.
Yes, we are.
Jennifer Armstrong, Rebecca Armstrong. All I can say,
Readers for our Julia Ward Howe Mother's Day proclamation?
we might have online, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to get to my laptop to send them the text. So
Why don't Jennifer and I
if
take
the
it?
two of you don't mind, that would be great.
Jennifer, why don't you start? And do you have your Mother's Day proclamation?
I do.
Good. Stanza by stanza then.
All right. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause.
Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, women of one country, will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence vindicate possession.
As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of council. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead. Let them then solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, each learning after his own time the sacred impress not of Caesar, but of God.
In the name of womanhood and of humanity, I earnestly ask that a general Congress of women without limit of nationality may be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient and at the earliest period consistent with its object, to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace.
This is a day of peace. This is a day for peace. This is a day the Lord has made. This is a day for peace. This is a day for joy. This is a day for joy. This is a day the Lord has made. This is a day for joy. And this is a day for love. love. This is a day for love. This is a day the Lord has made. This is a day for love. Oh, this is a day for hope. This is a day for hope. This is a day the Lord has made. This is a day for hope. Oh, this is a day for peace. This is a day for peace. This is a day the Lord has made. This is a day for peace.
Jennifer Armstrong, Rebecca Armstrong. To quote Olympia Brown, or who was it? Oh no, the other one. You are both tops that spin with greater velocity than any other tops in the surrounding area. I loved that. Unfortunately, it reminded me of the translation of top in Spanish. Get this, is trompo, which is a top that I hope stops spinning the sooner the better, if I say so myself. Thank you both. And I just feel so proud that this will be a statement that will be on our YouTube channel and shareable to the world of these two remarkable sisters, mothers, grandmothers. It's so perfect to have the two of you here on this day, Mother's Day. We have something called an offertory, which is just a reminder to everybody that we depend on your generosity to keep this thing going. There is a basket in the back for any help that you can give us. There is also a website that is communitychurchofboston.org, where you can exercise a PayPal or a credit card option to help us in whatever way that you feel comfortable with. I also want to tell you about a couple other things we have here. There's a beautiful gift shop on Martha's Vineyard that's called Olive Branch Fair Trade. They feature all Palestine products. Linda Cohen, the owner, sent us a whole box of keffiyehs, beautifully spun keffiyehs from Hebron in the West Bank of Palestine. And these are available for whatever you are able to contribute. The generouser, the better for community church, but sliding scale, if you will. Keffiyehs, we have a whole bunch of them. We've gotten rid of a few already. We got rid of a few last night at the Peña. I'll tell you, I think I mentioned the Peña, which is a Latin American style open mic that we have once a month, every second Saturday, urging you all to join the Peña. It's sort of a soapbox. You can get up and say whatever you will, but it's a little bit of a guided soapbox. You're asked to follow 2 or 3 different prompts. Last night it was about mothers, and it was about hope, and it was about immigration. And it was a beautiful, rich ceremony. It also featured incredible food cooked by none other than our president, Sandra Ruiz Harris, and volunteered by several of the other Latin American members of our congregation and of our board. So second Saturday every month, I can't say enough, and that'll go through all the way through the summer as well. I want to tell you about a few books that we have multiple copies for sale for you here. The first one is related to our June 1st in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, Sunday, June 1st event with Phil Turney of the USS Liberty. This is called Remember the Liberty, Almost Sunk by Treason on the High Seas. Several different authors, including Phil Turney, also Philip Nelson, Richard Kukal, and Ernest Gallo. Forward by our friend CIA analyst Ray McGovern. Here's another one by last week's speaker, Miko Peled. This is called Injustice, the Story of the Holy Land Foundation 5. That's the group that won our 2023 Sacco and Vanzetti Award, the Holy Land Foundation 5, Palestinian-American Muslim men who started a foundation that was brutally taken down, and these men imprisoned, some of them still in prison. Miko Peled. Here's another speaker we just had recently. His name is Dennis Fritz. Deadly Betrayal, the Truth About Why the United States Invaded Iraq. This is a wonderful presentation that we had with Larry Wilkerson and Dennis Fritz. You can find it on our YouTube channel as well. Dennis Fritz. This is one from 2 weeks ago's program. This is called a little bit different. It's not so directly political. It's called Project Puffin, the improbable quest to bring a beloved seabird back to the egg rock, with Derek Jackson. It was just a really different, wonderful sort of Earth Day program about Derek's involvement in this effort to bring puffins back to isolated islands off the coast of Maine. Derek Jackson, who used to be the Boston Globe columnist and sports writer. So that's a few of our books for sale. Also, I couldn't help but tell you that we have lots of groups that meet here, and they bring all kinds of stuff to our table. And I'm thinking that part of our archival efforts should be to archive everything that comes on our literature tables. The ones that, my favorite ones right now, this is a publication from over at Harvard, and it's called The New York War Crimes. And it looks like the New York Times, except it on this corner it says all the consent that's fit to manufacture. And it's called the Healthcare Edition. Stay until the end. Tell the story. Remember, free. And this was brought here. Another one that I love is a spoof on the Harvard Crimson, and it's called the Harvard Crimes On. And this is about the controversy. So that's going on. So we have a little bit of a conversation with Rebecca and Jennifer, and I want to start by saying that the end of the last story that Rebecca gave us that led that young man on his path to Islam, and that spoke to the tolerance of Unitarian Universalism, and spoke to our motto, which is back here: all races, all religions, all cultures, all genders, all orientations. Takes me to my mother. My sweet mother raised us beautifully. My parents, who gave me the most remarkable bicultural childhood, steeped in two different worlds, and just gave us lots of joy and love, and all the way to the end. This is for both of them, but especially my mom. Her obsession was, there is only one path to salvation, to enlightenment, to spiritual fulfillment, and that is the evangelical path. And I hate to say, Mom, I disappointed you in that regard. Not that I violently rejected anything, that I just lost interest. And I was telling the people at the Peña last night, how did that happen? Well, I went to an Ivy League school where it was the Vietnam era, and I discovered sex, drugs, and rock and roll and music, and then went on a musical tour, and I realized that there are lots of people out there with lots of different paths, and we have to honor and respect every one of those paths. So that was especially a remarkable moment, Rebecca, for me to hear that, especially with regard to Muslims who are in our congregation, and also with regard to a group that meets here that's called Muslims for Progressive Values, among many other groups that meet in this auditorium. I feel a special kinship with them and a special solidarity with regard to their perceptions of the conflicts in the Middle East and in, say, India and Pakistan right now, and the different perspectives that they can bring to us because of their closeness to that place. It's exactly the opposite of the White House. And what they're doing right now is basically anybody who says anything against us, we can arrest you and send you to a gulag in El Salvador. So thank you, Rebecca, for that. And I don't know if you have any response. I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, Dean, thank you for your comment about that. What's important, just in the context of the Unitarian history, again, is the role of the Islamic ideas in the furtherance of Unitarianism. It has been suggested that Michael Servetus came into contact with the Quran while he was studying at the University of Toulouse early in his life. And it was their insistence on the unity of God, not the Trinitarian concept that the Church had worked out, right? The unity of God and the importance of that religious concept that inspired our first genuine anti-Trinitarian Unitarian father, Michael Servetus. And then the role of Suleiman the Magnificent in the story of Queen Isabella and King John Sigismund into Transylvania. And wherever the Ottoman Empire expanded, they had sort of taken up the idea that people should continue their religious practices. You might be taxed more heavily if you were not a Muslim, but it didn't mean that you were ostracized or burned at the stake, which is what the Christians were doing to each other in Europe, right? So in a very important sense, there was this migration of the idea of tolerance from the Muslims to the Christians inside of this Transylvania story chapter, which is why it's so important. And the notion that we now have that, Islamic jihad warriors are the stereotype is truly, truly tragic. But it just represents a lack of knowledge of the deep, long history of that piece of the religious monotheism that arises from the self-same stories of the ancient Judeo-Christian tradition. All three of those religions of the book, right? We are all people of the book, come from the same seed. And to really be able to embrace that and understand what that means, and then go a step higher and recognize that the mystical traditions, as well as the humanist traditions of all of these religions, also meet in common ground. So that the only places where we are at odds with each other is in these closed-minded theological tract debates, right? Where you come to loggerheads and blows over your pint at the pub, rather than the freedom just to have a good rollicking discussion about different beliefs. So long live the Unitarians and the Muslims and the Catholics and the Jesuits and everybody. Let us find that place where we can celebrate again together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I would share with you also that this church officially calls itself non-sectarian, was founded by a Universalist minister from the Crane School of Theology at Tufts University, and has had a number of Unitarian ministers and Unitarian Universalist ministers, and has also had a defrocked Methodist minister, a Presbyterian minister, one congregational director who was from a Quaker tradition, and so a lot of different things. Our association with the UUA started when they offered the best health insurance plan for our minister in the 70s, and so that was what we went with and what we've been with ever since. We have tried to become what's called a fair share congregation, which means that we pay our fair share according to the number of members that we have. In the last couple of years, we haven't been able to do that because our main source of income, which is the restaurant lease on the first floor, was vacant. Unfortunate set of circumstances, but we're hoping to get back into that and enjoy the full benefits of full membership and fellowship with the UUA. We have a vice president right now who is especially interested in becoming sort of our emissary to the UUA and maybe going to the General Assembly, which we've not attended in quite a long time. So it's a beautiful thing. But on the other hand, you look at what we do, and it's pretty different from any other Unitarian Universalist congregation I've been in my years around the UU churches, from all the coffee houses that they hold. But that's a little picture into what we are and what we do, and this was just such a beautiful history window into the history of Unitarian Universalism, one that we don't hear about too much, just because we mostly focus on a lot of different other walks of discipline and life and science and medicine and art and all the other things. So this was just terrific. I want to find out if there's anybody else who would like to send a message to us and to your mom.
I have a question. Do we have time for questions?
Of course.
Well, let's have some questions. I'd like to ask Rebecca a little bit about if she knows anything about Margaret Fuller. Was she a Unitarian?
Well, as Dean sort of set up, the Unitarian label is a cloak that is worn lightly. If there's one defining characteristic of Unitarians, is that they don't want to be defined. And so they migrate through the various Protestant traditions, especially in New England. You start Universalist, then you dip your foot into Unitarian, then you become a humanist, then you become a transcendentalist, then you migrate back to, so yes, Margaret Fuller has been associated with the Unitarians, but like Ralph Waldo Emerson, who we claim he eventually threw off the Unitarian mantle just because it was anything that defines you as too constricting. But Margaret Fuller is another astonishing story. I mean, these women, the grit and determination blows me away, right? I mean, listening to the life story of Mary Moody Emerson, it's like, excuse me, we talk trauma, if she lived today, people would assume she'd be in psychoanalysis for 40 years just to try to deal with the trauma of being sent to a mad aunt and grandmother and having to deal with that. But no, she goes on to be the inspiration for one of the great thinkers of American literature. So the fortitude of these early women pioneers. There's a whole wonderful tradition of the westward expansion of the Unitarian Universalists, the horseback preachers, many of whom were women, who just went out and did what they needed to do to get the message out there. So yeah, there are so many stories we could tell, so many stories. Have me back next year and I'll bring Margaret Fuller to you.
Well, this was really wonderful and very inspiring. I'm going to share it with the minister at the church I go to in West Roxbury, because I think Yeah, she would love it. So thank you very much. It was
You're
wonderful.
very welcome. Does anyone else have a question or a
That
comment?
was my same thought, to want to share it with a bunch of different UU folks that I know. And here's a shout out to my favorite mother and nurturer and keeper of the home, and that would be Jennifer Johnston, who is my wife, who was just on there. Love you, Jen. Happy Mother's Day. And just to say also that Margaret Fuller would be really a great subject for us to have a Sunday talk. Let's look for one of the biographers of Margaret Fuller, or someone who wants to give a talk about her. An entire Sunday program would be amazing. Is there anyone else who would like to join in conversation or say hello to Jennifer or to Rebecca or to the folks who are here in the audience? Well, then that gives us reason to transition to our next stage, which all of you virtuals won't enjoy, which is the beautiful lunch that we have every time, and you will then and answer all the questions of the world. I love what you said about Unitarian Universalists not wanting to be defined. It reminds me of Utah Phillips, the great raconteur and songwriter, whose best line was, "Damned Unitarians burned a question mark in my lawn again." Sisters, now our meeting is over. Sisters, we must part. Sisters will be gone, but I will love you in my heart. And we'll land on the shore, and we'll land on the shore, and we'll land on the shore and be safe forevermore. Brothers, now our meeting is over. Brothers, we must part. Brothers, we'll be gone, but I will love you in my heart. And we'll land on the shore, and we'll land on the shore, and we'll land on the shore and be safe forevermore. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Rebecca Armstrong, Reverend Rebecca Armstrong, if you still like to be called by that moniker, and Jennifer Armstrong, North Carolina, Rebecca in LaPorte, Indiana. We love you so much, and we thank you for this beautiful presentation. Happy Mother's Day to all of you out there. Over and out.